Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. So I have this letter from Claire, and Claire lets us know ahead of time that this is a little bit of a lengthy letter. So I'm going to be doing running commentary as I read through it and share my thoughts and feelings at the end, especially if there's any questions as well too. So let's dive in. Claire starts. I met my ex 3 years ago in another country where I was tired of the dating scene in my own country and had given up on finding someone until I came across his dating profile via a dating app. He was of another nationality, as was I, and at the time when I met him, I was a 31-year-old woman and he was 29. We hit it off instantly. And in the beginning, I remember he was forthcoming in communication and was steadily making plans. We used to see each other 2 to 3 times a week, despite being in the same city, because we wanted to take things slow. When I brought up the topic of being exclusive after around 2 months of dating, he was open to the idea, and soon around the mark of 5 months, we were referring to each other as girlfriend and boyfriend. Things were going really well. After about a year, I decided to take up a job opportunity in another country. And before saying yes to the offer, I had discussed with him where he assured me that we'd make it work by seeing each other twice a month. I'd fly to him and he'd fly to me when I was working in this new country. We also met each other's family during this 1.5 years, and we even expressed long-term goals of being with each other. I was nearing 33, and I told him how I'd like to be married soon. While we were on the topic of being long-term in a relationship, he also mentioned how he thinks we should both get a fertility test done because he wanted to make sure if we could have kids. I found this request a bit odd, and given that I'd had PCOS, it made me slightly insecure. Fair enough. However, I went ahead and did my test, and he did his. Mine had come out to be positive, meaning nothing wrong, and I was found to be healthy reproductively. However, his tests were not so great. 2 months later, after this discussion, I noticed he had started withdrawing, and when we met, he told me that he doesn't feel ready for marriage, but he doesn't want to break up. He also told me about his plans of moving to a new country in 6 months' time to start his own business without mentioning how he'd also involve making our relationship work. This was in complete contrast to how I dealt with the situation where I was offered a job in an alternative country. I would have appreciated it if he'd shown a similar level of involvement for his plans to move to a new country. Yeah, completely agree. I want to take this moment here to say I do find it very interesting that everything seems to devolve quite rapidly after the reproductive test results came in. And what's interesting to me is I almost wonder, Did this guy know that he had an issue with reproduction and he just brought this up as a way of then backpedaling from the relationship? But regardless, it does seem interesting to me under the context of, someone who is severely avoidant. I could see how, a fear of I'm broken, you wouldn't want me anyways, might have started to be the catalyst for him to withdraw as well too, because if he felt like he couldn't give you what you need, then that might have been something that started this spiral into him withdrawing from you. But that's pure speculation on my part. Let's keep going. I was left feeling anxious. Eventually, as days progressed, we discussed maybe I could move to an alternative country to make it work. My job allowed me to be remote, so I started discussing working towards it with him. It involved me getting a visa process, finding a new home. What should have been a team-based activity seemed like a one-man show. While I understand he was tackling his move, but still I could sense that his involvement in this plan was surface level. As one would anticipate, within a month of moving to this new country for him, he broke up with me. He sent me an email with a bouquet of flowers and justified how our timelines do not match, and hence he thinks we should break up. I was devastated and felt blindsided, especially because we had discussed getting married. I was hurting, but I continued to stay in touch, and eventually he decided to come back. Very soon, I got another job opportunity in another country, and we agreed to make it work between the two countries. I wanted reassurance, and therefore I asked him to agree in writing that we would only get back if he agreed to work on being exclusive, have a path of convergence to end long distance, and clarity on how often we would see each other while we were working long distance. I want to just tell you now, Claire, that I think you did an amazing job of speaking up for yourself because I know a lot of people wouldn't for understandable reasons, but good on you for doing this. He agreed to it all. Things were going fine. I spent Christmas with his family and the New Year's with the two of us. In summer, we had plans of him spending time in Europe between and his family, where he's originally from. However, I noticed that when I brought up the topic of marriage during December, he said we could get a civil ceremony done in May of 2024. Between February and April, I went to him twice for 3 weeks at a time as he couldn't travel because of work, and he'd come to see me at my home country to celebrate a festival with my family. I remember him getting cold feet before this trip to see me, but eventually he pushed through. He'd expressed that for reasons unexplained, he still feels not ready. This revelation had left me perturbed and feeling more anxious. Yeah, I bet. I'm not sure if I'm an anxious person because I don't remember being as anxious when we were in, where we'd met. But of late, especially given this behavior, the way had broken up with me when I went to see him where he was working, I'd started to feel intense anxiety. I want to take a moment here to say a lot of people understandably have this thought of, well, I don't know if I'm anxiously attached or not. Maybe it was just because I was dating someone who induced a lot of anxiety in me. And I want to say that's valid. But if you find that you are dating lots more of people like this, or you've had people whose behavior resemble, one of your caregivers, people at school, a sibling, then we have to look at a much bigger issue, which is the fact that I don't think this was just a one-off, but there are many people like Claire who could have just gotten unlucky in the sense that they dated someone who has a lot of insecurities that were brought out by this insecure person. Anyways, let's keep going. Anyway, what really left me devastated was the fact that when he did come to see me for 3 days, and then he left to see his siblings for a couple of days, we'd agreed that after his siblings' trip, he would return to see me together for 2 weeks, and then we would go to meet his parents. The morning we were supposed to arrive in the town that I was staying in, I got a text from him saying that he decided to take a break. He did not mention where he was headed, and told that he would think this time over because he thought it would be valuable for both of us. He even said that he'd hoped I would still join him in 2 weeks' time to meet his family. He then goes missing for the next 24 hours. I tried calling him twice and messaged him, but I received no answer. I felt as if someone had choked me. 24 hours later, he messaged to tell me that he was in a completely different country and that he felt the need to take some time for himself, to work on his writing and to focus on himself. During those 2 weeks, we hardly spoke, and I felt betrayed and quite sad. Yeah, well, fair enough. I don't blame you, Claire. He didn't seem to realize that he had done anything wrong. When asked why he lied and was not upfront, his explanation was that he did not want to fight during our time when we were together where I was staying, and that this plan of his to go to this completely remote part of the world was quite last minute. When I asked him to show me the date when he had booked his tickets, he refused to do so. Anyways, I did end up going to his home country to see his family and him because I figured it might be the last time I'd be seeing him. From his end, nothing seemed to have changed. He was affectionate and loving. We did agree to not discuss issues in front of his parents, but instead went for walks in the evenings. He did agree that maybe in hindsight he should have been communicative about going to this part of the world and that he regrets the way he did. Yeah, well, he should have because how he did that was really destructive and not okay. You don't just book out to a new country like that, let alone decide to just check out of a relationship by, deciding to take space without involving your partner. This is such crappy behavior. So I'm really sorry that this is what occurred. One thing that happened while we were together in his home country is that I went through his bags because I was feeling really skeptical and something that I'd never done before. I ended up finding individual condom packets made from the country that he was in prior in his wallet, fanny pack, and backpack. When I confronted him about this, he said he had brought it for us. To this date, he maintains the fact that he did not use those condoms with anyone and that he has a habit of keeping condoms, which now that he thinks about it is a very weird thing to do when you are a couple. I'm going to take a moment here to say that sounds like bullshit. I wouldn't be surprised if he was probably feeling, at the very least, some sexual urges when he went to that different country. And I wouldn't be surprised at worst if he acted on it, because to me, his answering, his reasoning and his answers make no sense, and it's a rationalization. I suspect he feels quite guilty and shameful for the fact that he actually had some breakup urges and was just about to act on them. Let's go back to your letter. I could not believe why would he go to such an extent to hurt me, or did he really think I was so naive? No, I think he just didn't want to be coming clean and admitting to the fact that he'd actually gone into what I would call very dangerous affair territory. We parted from agreeing to make it work, but a month later, when we were supposed to meet midway, he pulled away and ended things over text. He suggested we should become friends, which I denied. A day later, he comes back apologizing and convinces me to come to where he's now at. I give in, but a few days later, he again goes cold and stops communicating. In summary, we're not speaking now, and from his side, we're done. All this was done through text because he said he didn't feel ready for a phone call. When I asked him for clarity on what he meant by not being ready, he told me the following. One, he really tried making it work because he had not felt like this for anyone, but his fears got a better hold of him. Damn right they did. I would agree with that. He projected himself getting married and having kids with me, but he felt that our timelines did not match. That's just bullshit. To me, that just screams that he was just, you know, deeply afraid that he wouldn't be able to give you what you were looking for. And instead of hashing it out and also maybe speaking to a mental health professional, he ends up breaking the relationship with you. He also goes on to add that he'd felt extreme anxiety both ways at the thought of committing and the thought of not being in touch. Okay, so that definitely speaks to his fear of intimacy and commitment, but also his fear of abandonment with you as well too. The latest reason he has told me that he's reflected and realized that he loved me a lot, which led him to think long term, and he realizes that he would like to have a big family with 4+ kids. This creates a tension between timelines and objectives, as I am now 34 and he is 32. Jesus, what a waste of time from his end. I mean, he's just wasted your time completely, which is not okay. I was shocked hearing this because while we discussed kids and didn't discuss any specific number, it came out of complete nowhere that he had actually had these desires all along. This had basically left me feeling completely baffled, as this guy is so obsessed with progeny, and it did not factor in the bond that we'd shared and the relationship we'd cultivated together. My feelings are all over the place. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I feel quite anxious, sad, and betrayed. I'd like to get your perspective on what exactly was going on with my ex. Why did he behave this way? Why would he be so affectionate and then the sheer idea of commitment made him act out of his character? Are these traits of an avoidant person? Hell yeah, they are. So let's get straight into it. This is avoidant attachment 101. And I'm going to say, I'm thinking more, again, I suspect this is more dismissive avoidant territory. even though he came back to you. The reason being that there, even though his behavior definitely seems a little bit boomerangy for sure, there are a few differences from the erratic and very turbulent vibes you get with someone who has those real fears of another person controlling them, and also that passive aggressiveness and also all that hyper emotionality that you can sometimes get with someone who's a dismissive leaning fearful avoidant or even an anxious leaning fearful avoidant. But let's just put the labels and the categories aside for one hot second. The thing to me that really speaks out about this was there were some significant moments in your timeline that just made me go, yep, here are some big fears that are coming out. Fear of commitment, fear of not being able to give you what you want around the time when you did the reproduction test. Also, when he was moving to do his startup, I find it really fascinating that he broke up with you there, and it seems to me that he was expressing a lot of love for you, but simultaneously it seems like his rationale was we're just on two completely separate timelines. To me, a lot of his decision making from that point on, including the move to go to that country, sound to me like he was unilaterally deciding what was best for both of you without involving you. And to me, it's just so destructive what he's doing there. And I don't think it's a case of, if he wanted to, he would, or he just wasn't that into you. He absolutely was into you from the looks of things. But I think what's really fascinating to me is the fact that it just seems like this guy really struggled with being able to he really struggled to get out of his own head and just be present in what was going on. And I think there probably was a great deal of shame around the fact that a test had come out, negative for him about his reproductive capabilities. And the fact that he also had some condoms like far down the line in your relationship, which was so unnecessary, suggests to me there probably is a degree of shame in what he can and can't do sexually. And it does suggest to me that maybe he harbors a great deal of shame about himself. Maybe he has some toxic perfectionism. But this is still, going back to the attachment stuff, is still very consistent with someone who I think is a dismissive avoidant on the basis that, he's someone who is deeply afraid of committing to you in a relationship at a deeper, deeper level. He will probably still be able to commit to somebody if that intimacy isn't there. But I do think it'll be on his terms where he feels like he's not feeling shame. He's not feeling guilty at the idea of not being able to live up to the perceived expectation of what you're looking for. But still, this is just so, like, it's so jarring. And I suspect too that his desire for kids, I love how you called it progeny. That was so funny. It's just not a word that I hear very often to describe that. To me, I feel like he's in Narnia. The way he's describing this with a condition of his, and the fact that he doesn't seem to be taking any active steps to work on his fertility issues suggests to me this is a man who's living in fantasy land about what he thinks he can achieve, and he's now punishing you because of his own shame. I don't think he's doing this maliciously. I just think that he's someone who really struggles with being able to realize that he's not a flawed human being. He's not someone who will forever be doomed not to have children. And he doesn't have to act out of fear to manipulate what's going on between the two of you to make himself feel better because of all this terrible toxic shame he carries inside of him. I think that this is a man who's got so much stuff and wounding going on. I dare say, with a course of therapy, I suspect that he actually could get it together and actually work on this, but I'm not giving you any inclination that he'll be able to work on this and get, and be able to achieve this in the time that you're probably looking for, because it sounds to me like you are desperate to, go to the next stage of things. And I think this guy, he needs so much work on himself. And I think he uses work and, entrepreneurship as a bit of an escapism for himself to like start afresh. And look, he's already, spontaneously decided to move country multiple times to get away from you and the relationship. And I think being in that relationship with you was causing him deep, 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 deep stress. Not because you were doing anything wrong, far from it. I think it was because I feel like he was coming up with all this unnecessary pressure on himself to be someone for you that he felt like he couldn't be. But I reckon if he actually worked on it and got past a lot of this toxic shame, he might have actually been able to pull it together. I don't think his case is hopeless by any stretch of the imagination, but as he is right now, I don't think that he's doing anything particularly helpful to create a healthy relationship between the two of you. Also, Claire wants to add a few other things. He said he'd get a paternity test no matter if I got pregnant. He wanted to donate his sperm, and it even started the process when he moved initially to that country. And I felt quite blindsided by the decision because I saw no effort from his side for a shared future. He thought about having multiple kids is quite cool. Later on, he also added that he is doing this to quote unquote help people. I don't believe this is the reason. Oh, I do. There's something here about wanting to help people, which is classic dismissive avoidant. Many of them get off on the idea of actually being very helpful to people. To me, this is a thing, I think to me, this is coming from a very misguided notion that he believes, being of service to others, being of help, rather than actually connecting with people is what relationships are about. I wouldn't be surprised, and this is me talking purely from speculation land, so please take this with a pinch of salt. But I wouldn't be surprised if he has some very misguided notions as to what is, reasonable expectations of a relationship. Many dismissive avoidants who also come from very enmeshed backgrounds have this belief of, well, I will give to the poor, the downtrodden, the needy, because they're doing so badly and I need to support and help them. And it gives them a sense of relief and satisfaction that makes them feel like I'm doing a good job. And this connects again to that core wound of them thinking that they're a bad person. And so this is their way of making them feel like they're actually worthy, good, doing the right thing. But it's all ego based. And so I don't actually think his desire to have kids is necessarily coming exclusively from a place of passion. To me, it seems more like a place of escapism and also a place of making him, soothe that very, very nasty internal wound that he likely has. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a tendency to hang around people who just, aren't the best for him. And he tends to spend a lot of time and energy trying to help people who, really do need a lot of professional support, but he thinks he can take that on. Clara goes on to add, he was paranoid about getting a prenup, and while I was open to it, I found it quite odd to focus on the prenup even before discussing other important things for the future. Again, for me, it goes into the realm of escapism. I feel like this man is just in Narnia trying to construct a future that hasn't even happened. He also mentioned how he found it quite interesting that compared to other nationalities, people from my background have a very low divorce rate, which led him to think that if we were to separate, then it would have more repercussions for me and my family. This is such negative future thinking, which is, again, very typical for people with a severe avoidant attachment style. People with insecure attachments have some very low views of relationships, and dismissive avoidants tend to have high view of self, low view of others, low view of love, low view of relationships. And they tend to project the worst case scenario where they tend to badger on about divorce rates. They badger on about what if this isn't going to work out? It's almost like they just can't get it together to think, well, what if this could work? And it seems simple to think that, you'd be able to persuade these individuals to get it together and be able to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But unfortunately, they have a proclivity to catastrophize about the worst case scenarios, and they don't have the tools or the skill set to ground themselves. And it might sound like I'm coming across as very harsh to the guy that you dated, but the reality is that this has a real dangerous implication on people like you, because you, Claire, as I'm sure you understand, feel traumatized, hurt, lost. He deserves help and is absolutely worthy of love and empathy, but I am not his therapist, and I'm also not yours. But I also think too, this kind of behavior, this defeatist thinking, these really bad inner woundings that he might carry on to have significant consequences on people that he's dating, and also can potentially cause them to miss out on goals and futures and passions that they want for themselves. So it's not okay that he's behaving like this, and he seriously needs a lot of help. In any case, I'm just going to round it here. I know that Claire later on asked me, what would I do if I was in this situation? Now, as a counselor, I can't provide any advice. And I know I'm not here as a counselor, I'm here as an edutainer. But I guess if it were me, in a situation like this, and please bear in mind, this is me, not you, Claire. So, I understand you may feel differently, but I would actually take the time to take space for yourself. I would be taking the time to be like, I just need to grieve, to process my feelings. I'm open to the idea of staying in semi-contact while I just work through this. I would actually be going low to no contact with this guy just to sort out your feelings initially. And then I think if you felt like you still wanted to maintain access with this dude, by all means, that's your prerogative. But if it were me, I'd be like, this is just too confusing and too hurtful. And it seems like you have some unresolved issues. I think if we're going to make this work, I think you need to go to couples counseling at the very least with me or therapy because I can't do this alone and this is killing me. And even though I love you, it just feels like we're not getting anywhere with this. That's how I would approach it. In any case, I'm going to round it here. Claire, thank you so much for sharing this with me. And I'm so sorry that you went through this because this is horrific. And it's a really awful experience to have had this happen to you on so many instances where I can imagine there was a lot of finances being thrown at the wall to try and make this work. And it would have been a very, very intense experience. In any case, thank you very much for submitting this letter. For those of you who enjoyed this episode and would like to submit your own, you're very welcome to submit your letter once it is available again next month when we open for submissions. You're very welcome to share them when I open that for people as well too. And as for now, I just want to say thank you very much for attending this. If this video was of any help, please feel free to like it and review it. And I will be back around for the next letter submission.